This below screen. So now you can actually find here, there you can see it. Not really. So now you can find these cards.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, let's go ahead and get started. We are ready to go. Thanks, Dave. That's helpful. Really like to require project, or maybe for the next. It's not my job. It's okay. It's actually a good day. You know, it's supposed to be. So this is a happy occasion. This is the first of our two nights for final project presentations. And I know you guys have worked really, really hard on your project, and it's really exciting to kind of see the final results. So we're going to, without a lot of further ado, just get right into it. For our esteemed panel, who are both here and on Zoom. Our students have been working since January on these projects. They self-identified the project they were interested in, and then they've kind of negotiated and discussed things, and some people kind of clustered around some ideas, and some people went off on their own, and they found their own way to something that they were passionate about, because that was a requirement. And what they're trying to do, and what this class is all about, is to take an idea about something that they've observed in their communities that they think should be better. And so rather than us telling them, here are the projects for you to work on, we asked them, tell us what should be better where you live. And how would you go about explaining that? How would you explain it to, say, a decision maker, somebody who is in authority, who maybe might be able to run with your idea and to make it a reality eventually, not tomorrow. We're just talking about it. And so these projects are ideas that students have been tasked with identifying what the issue or opportunity is, explaining why it's important, explaining what alternatives might exist to respond to that issue or opportunity, and then to make a recommendation on what they think is the best way to take advantage of that opportunity or to address that issue. And they are to do it in 5 minutes. And the reason that we use the 5-minute rule, because we figure you very well may be at a kind of an open comment session with a board of trustees or a city council. And there are always time limits. And frequently the time limits are even shorter than that. 2 minutes is common, but I live large here. I have the luxury of being at the university. So they have a 5-minute limit to me. I don't have a timer. I told you I wasn't going to do that. I'm speaking against interest here. I should have told you there's going to be a timer. Look, pull people in. But the idea is for them to be able to make their case in a limited amount of time. And their job is to try to not sell somebody on an idea, but to get them interested in that idea so that potentially they could get a decision maker that they're presenting it to say, that's an interesting idea. How would you take the next step? Or here's some ideas about how you might take the next step so that they could kind of advance their project ideas eventually someday to conclusions. So that's what they're tasked with. We have 6 projects tonight. 7 are scheduled for a week tonight. And we want to thank our panelists for being here, our jury. We have an esteemed jury that I'll now introduce. On Zoom is Salt Lake City Council member Darren Malno. Darren is a native of Sandy, Utah. He has degrees in architecture from Harvard and the University of Utah. He has taught architecture and planning at the University of Utah. He's been a mentor and a teacher in classes that I've been involved in, and so it's a pleasure to be in a room when Darren's teaching. And since 2020, he has been a member of the city council, represents District 5, which is the ballpark district, which is also where he lives. And thank you so much, Darren, for being here. And Darren is currently the chair of the Salt Lake City Council. And so we are very pleased and privileged for you to join us today. Thank you. And tell us, by all means, tell us if you can't hear well. We've got these big microphone arrays here, and we can hear you. But if the sound somehow goes wonky, please let us know.
It's a little echoey, but when you speak up, I can hear.
Okay. So that's a word to all the people who are presenting to speak up. Someone also with our panel who also has a history with the Salt Lake City Council is Carlton Christensen. Carlton is currently the chair of the UTA Board of Trustees, but he served for 16 years on the Salt Lake City Council, and that's where I got to know him first. But then also has done various stints with various organizations, some of them public, some of them private, all focusing around the issues of community development in one way or the other. And Carlton's been with the UTA board now for 5 years, is that right? Yeah, nearly 5 years. And we are so pleased that he's here on campus and joining us today, here to help us understand these projects. So thank you. Welcome. I know this sounds like, especially for those from Moab, are like, oh, wow, Salt Lake City. Well, I'm sorry. You can use what is close to you, because our last number is also with Salt Lake City. Anna Valdemoros, I first knew as a student in a class that I taught here. Anna became a student here at the university a few years ago. And we're not saying exactly.
It's okay, it's like 23 years ago.
No.
That's fine.
Anna has undergraduate and master's degrees in planning from this very college. And so she is one of our most accomplished alums. And we are so proud of everything that Anna's done. She has worked in the city as a planner in various forms and guises. She's spent time in the nonprofit sector with NeighborWorks, which is a community development and housing nonprofit here. She's also an entrepreneur. It's a Square Meal. Square Kitchen is one of her ideas that was launched about 5 years ago in the Poplar Grove neighborhood, and it's a place for other entrepreneurs in the food industry to have a space where they can create and launch businesses from. She also is very skilled in making killer evidence.
Do a lot of things, guys. Perfectly, yeah. I just want to say one thing. Like you said, 5 minutes. Like kind of like an elevator pitch. That's what Darren and I do when we go to DC as well to meet our senators. Like this is real life. We're 7 of us. Sometimes the mayor comes along. We meet with Senator Romney, Senator Lee, and the other 4 congressmen, and then each of us essentially probably had 1 minute to talk, maybe 2, and say these are the things that we need in Salt Lake City, and these are the things that we're working on, and these are the problems, and these are the great things that we do. So it's true, and don't think this too short, but that's how things get moving in government. I feel like you have to tell the story, kind of sell it, and hopefully the next year they'll remember, and then you can talk about it again and go into it deeper. So it works. It works.
It's the way government runs. All on a time vector. Anna represents District 4, where we currently sit on the Salt Lake City Council, and has been on the council since 2019. So that is our panel. As I said, we have 6 projects, and I've tried to kind of mix them up for different types of content and different types of presentation. And the first project is a project, I don't think they call it this, but I always call it the Park Connections Project, because that's what it's about. And here to do the Park Connections Project are Marissa and Maddie and Kristen.
Hello. And then here to talk about multimodal safety at park intersection. So our parks are public spaces intended for the whole community to enjoy. But they're often bordered by high-speed, high-volume streets that serve as a barrier for a lot of people to get to these parks. These intersections are problematic because they have long crossing distances, short crossing times, poor visibility, and high-speed, high-volume traffic. For example, some park intersections you can see on the right, they currently require faster walking speeds than average walking speeds for children and older adults. Thank you. So this is all Salt Lake City data here. We have a significant proportion of our severe and fatal pedestrian reported crashes around Pioneer, Liberty, and Sugar House show that we have 21 pedestrians and 14 hit along these parks on the arterial since 2017. The city also just joined the Vision Zero network, which puts health, equity, and safety as the highest priorities for streets. And we think that park location should be an area of focus for this program.
So we kind of, when we were thinking about the solutions, we're thinking specifically about Liberty Park, Sugar House Park, and Pioneer Park, just because they're representative of a lot of these issues we see. But we think this should apply to all parks. We can have safer access. Next slide. And right now, visitors are way too auto-focused. This often leads to sometimes people choosing not to visit our parks, which is very sad. There's some really great gems to be explored. And then the ones that are choosing to go are choosing to get in their cars to get there, which just exacerbates this problem. This is only going to get worse as Salt Lake City is projected to grow, and these parks are going to be even more important spaces for people to get there. So we've kind of thought of these solutions, we've categorized them into 4 focus areas, and within those kind of come up with a menu of options to be considered. So the first is signal changes. Some of the things we thought about with signal changes is just, first of all, making sure that they have the automatic walk signal so people don't have to sit through multiple cycles to get through to parks. The second is to consider the leading pedestrian interval, which allows pedestrians to start their crosswalk before the light turns green, so they're just a little more visible for the traffic. Maybe also considering more mid-crossings with the honk signals that people can activate. They're a little bit more responsive. And just reconsidering like what are, like Kristen mentioned, what are our crossing times? Can we create a better traffic hierarchy here? And then maybe a more innovative option is at some of these intersections, thinking about having a permissive right turn signal. Again, just to send that reminder to automobile drivers that there are people here that want to cross the road and they are the priority. Next slide.
Another area of solutions that we thought about, which is kind of a quicker, easier solution here, is just increasing signage and lighting to improve visibility of both pedestrians and cyclists. So this can help increase driver awareness and help pedestrians feel more safe. And it's also important that all of these signages consider both the street lighting, or sorry, the lighting is considered on the street perspective and the crosswalk or sidewalk perspective to ensure it's as safe as possible. Next slide. And lastly, kind of the largest area that we talked about is physical traffic calming. So things like refuge islands, like you can see here in the photo, curb extensions, change in materials. These things can be more costly and time consuming, but they can really make it much safer for pedestrians and cyclists, improving visibility, slowing traffic, and they're highly effective. So on our next slide, what we'd like to propose is not just one of these things that we listed from the menu today, but is really rather a program in and of itself. You may have heard of the Safe Routes to Schools program. We'd like to propose that we have something like a Safe Routes to Parks program, which could combine all three of these options and more that really can be done in phases. So each intersection that surrounds the park is studied on what would be best for this intersection to keep it as safe as possible. And then we can implement the quick and inexpensive safety measures first to make sure we're really prioritizing that and not waiting. And then as more intensive, costly solutions are proposed, we can implement those in planning processes, like for example, what's now the 99 trail along Liberty Park or the new park in Glendale. As opportunities come up, this could be really prioritized center safety and access for all. Thank you.
So we were hoping to have a little bit of time for you guys to reflect back on what you've seen and your ideas, and with an eye towards making suggestions on where they could go with this idea. Yeah, just jump right in.
What are your thoughts on some of these routes or state highways? And that is somewhat amenable to distance, but I guess the question is, how do you balance sort of throughput to the pedestrian, and how would you find sort of that delicate balance between the two?
We actually talked to Jeff Golden with the city transportation division, said that he mentioned that too, like a lot of the arterials are state roads, and said that they've been pretty good at like collaborating between the city and the state to kind of see what works best, so that both the city's priorities and the state's priorities can be kind of find a middle ground there.
And in some ways, having like a guidebook could kind of alert UDOT ahead of time, right? They wouldn't be surprised by some of these proposals that are like, oh yeah, that was something that's always considered when we think about redesign around parks.
I have an example in that I think it's related to this. And I tell you what the issues that I'm encountering with at the city. So we have a green loop in the 2016 master plan. I'm not sure if you're aware of. So the city at some point with people thought, well, maybe if we do a green loop where we can put parks in the middle of the street, not only to provide more green space in District 4, at least because we have the least amount of open space in our city, but also as a traffic calming measure. It would be a great idea. So everybody said, yes, in 2016, let's do it. It's in the master plan. The city council approved it, everything. So 2016, we're 2023, we're barely going to implement one of the streets on 2nd East between 3rd South and 4th South. So right across the street from the city and county building. And it has become the major contention project that it's so cool, but it's also a matter of, I feel like sometimes we as planners and maybe as officials, we need to communicate better and like sell the idea to the constituency, because for us, this is our plan that we're gonna do it, like as planners, all of us, like absolutely, you know, green space in the middle of the street and you have a shorter street and trees and all of the things. Yes, like there's nothing to worry, I mean, nothing to like complain about. But in reality, we encounter people along the way that are completely, you know, annoyed by it. They don't like change. And so those are the things that I would like you guys to think as well when you go out in life and propose these things. Also a way to, you know, to get all the buy-in from most people, because that's the one thing that you're going to like, you know, the things that slow down processes.
I think
But come, sorry, Darren, but come to the green loop, May 1st, it's going to open. We need your feedback. We need that way we can compare those numbers at the end. It's going to be on for 2 months, and so that we can show all the neighbors that people actually liked it. It was
I think that what Anna brought up is important because yeah, understanding that there are a lot of different audiences for an idea, and you need to, a lot of times you need to speak to all of them or at least multiple of them. This proposal that you have shown, I think the need was well stated and the potential solutions were easy to follow. So you did a good job on your presentation. I think what Carlton brought up as well, though, is with the state highways, the audience is going to receive it very differently. So for me, and I would imagine Anna and probably Carlton, who are residents of the city and love parks and all of that, you don't need to spend a lot of time selling us on that this is important. But when you're talking to a representative of UDOT, for whom their mandate is to get people from Sandy to their job downtown as quickly as possible and move traffic, as much traffic through the intersection in the number of seconds as possible, you have to change that message to help them understand why this is important. So I think understanding who you're talking to and maybe changing that message, like you could have said two sentences to me and I would have said, yes, absolutely, this is important. And we could have spent the rest of the time talking about how do we get it done. But if you're talking to other people, even residents of Salt Lake City, I would say District 5 is probably one of the most like bike and pedestrian friendly, sort of forward thinking progressive districts. I get tons of people asking me for things like this, which is great. There are still some residents in my district and throughout the city for whom they think vehicle traffic is the most important thing and the only thing that we should focus on because no one wants to walk, which I disagree with. And I makes it sounds like you three disagree with that as well, but not everyone does. So changing your message depending on who you're talking about is really important. And so I would say to get something like this done, it's getting it, making the people that you know are going to agree with you aware and get them interested in it. And then the people that probably won't agree with you, selling them a little bit more on that, but then really digging into the how. And when I think of the how for this, in Salt Lake City right now, the voters just passed a general obligation bond for parks. And I'm wondering if maybe the planning of those parks. So right now we have a generationally large planning effort for all of our open spaces and parks. We've hired additional people to help us plan the parks. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be too hard to get that group, since it's already happening and mobilized, to look at just a little bit beyond the boundaries of the park and work with transportation to plan some of these things, get the plans a little bit more fleshed out, like where does the hawk signal go? Where is a raised crosswalk? All like actually plan them all and then use the next few years to figure out funding, because it seems like we may be at a really good spot right now where we can connect some of our current park planning efforts into just expand it a little bit to this. But if that were not the case, then we may want to look for funding a specific study to hire an outside consultant to come up with those things. So digging into that how, I think there's actually probably a lot of avenues.
So the press release from the city for the temporary project, the Green Loop temporary project, is on our front page on our class. So yeah, we're already on there. But the points about, well, it's a lot of these roads are UDOT facilities. And when Andrea Olson from UDOT was here, she was one of our presenters a few weeks ago. One of the things we talked with her about is, well, who does UDOT listen to? Well, UDOT listens primarily to local government. And so even with the UDOT owned and operated facilities, really, citizens who want to see something happen, their first stop probably should be City Hall. Because if you want to get UDOT's attention, having an ally who is a city council member or mayor may be your key to doing that. And so that's one of our kind of our strategies, is where friend building is it. Yeah.
In the last legislative session, they approved a new program for creating a paved trail system throughout the state.
Yeah, the ATIP.
Yeah, so there's $40 million annually on that program, and in the urban fabric, you're going to have to use some of these facilities. So there's probably some opportunities there that not historically been, and so how do you couch it? How do you think about framing it? Go a long ways.
Well, our next project is also about walkability, also near a park, but with a little bit of a different focus. Sugar House walkability in ways you probably haven't thought about. So Anna Maki. Anna is our president of our Point B organization. Point B is our student transportation organization. You might remember Point B, and Anna is our current president.
Been a fun exercise in public speaking.
Lots of opportunity.
All right, my name is Anna. The project that I focus on for Wasatch Transportation Academy is Sugar House walkability. When most people think of Sugar House, they tend to relate it to really walkable places. There's really high density. There's a lot of mixed land use in pretty close proximity to a lot of the residences in the area. But there are quite a few areas and hotspots within Sugar House in particular that are extremely inaccessible and unsafe to people walking and rolling in the area. For those a little less familiar with Sugar House, there are two primary destinations, the Central Business District and Sugar House Park. My colleagues did a wonderful job of addressing accessibility to parks, so I am focusing a little bit more on the Central Business District for this presentation. Just a little bit of relevance. In 2022, just last year, Salt Lake City published the Local Link study, which found that pedestrian crashes in the last decade appeared to be centered around commercial centers with medium to high levels of pedestrian activity. And it specifically called out the Sugar House Business District as one of these areas, which is just pictured right up here. A little bit of background and relevance as well. There are land and existing projects that will be addressing pedestrian accessibility in the near future. The S-Line is hopefully planned to have an expansion up to Highland Drive. 2100 South and 1300 East are both in the discussion phase of projects, and those will address pedestrian accessibility also. And then Highland Drive is currently undergoing pedestrian or road improvements, and those will include a multi-use pedestrian path as well as bike lanes. But what all of those improvements, while they're wonderful to start bringing residents from outside of the Central Business District into the area, they really lack that essential east-west connection within the business district itself. This area is really composed of a parking lot. There's quite a few retail and restaurant destinations for folks to get to, but the majority of land use, particularly pictured here, is for parking lot. There's 875 parking spots within the perimeter that I've drawn there. I've also highlighted some of the spots that have high potential conflict between pedestrians, people walking and rolling, and vehicles, either because a car is turning into the sidewalk to get to the parking lot, or a sidewalk just ends out of nowhere. When we think of parking lots, we think of cars. Obviously, that's mostly what they're there for, but especially in the United States, a lot of the destinations that people are trying to get to are surrounded by a parking lot. So if you want to walk, roll, or even drive to one of these destinations, you're required to walk through a very large parking lot to get there. And as I mentioned, even if you drive at a certain point, you're required to get out of your car and walk. So at some point, everyone is a pedestrian inside of a parking lot. I have a couple of recommendations to improve pedestrian accessibility, specifically for the Sugar House Business District area and the large parking lot that takes up the majority of land use. The Winco in South Salt Lake has a good example of just a single pathway all the way up to the front of the grocery store. There's only one, but it goes through the middle of the parking lot, so it provides access for people walking there. And then it also has an added benefit for anyone who parks along this pathway. They're able to get out of their car and safely walk to the front of the store. Another option would be to do a policy change of looking at parking lots as streets. You might think of this as kind of more of a, okay, well, this will turn it into a speedway, but if the right components are added to this, it'll actually improve pedestrian accessibility, because streets have a lot of the things that parking lots don't have, such as sidewalks, curb cuts, crosswalks, vegetation for pedestrians, etc. And then finally, either reducing or removing required parking in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City does have quite a few reduced parking options that could be applicable to this site. Shared parking would be one option. For example, if the movie theater and the yoga studio have different levels of visitation at different times of day, they could look at shared parking. Carpool parking, proximity to transit is one. The S line is in close proximity, as well as multiple UTA fixed bus routes. And then finally doing a parking study to demonstrate that not as much parking is needed, which would tie in really well with improved pedestrian accessibility mentioned in the previous couple of slides. With improved ped accessibility, more people might feel more comfortable walking to these destinations, resulting in reduced parking that's necessary. And finally, because we do live in a capitalist society, and I recognize that this land is owned by a developer, reduced parking could ultimately lead to more developable and usable land in an extremely high economically valuable area that is currently being used as storage for personal vehicles. That is everything.
Darren, you want to start with us this time?
Sure. So you're not wrong. That shopping center is not walkable and is a ton of parking. I think that the very last thing that you said is actually probably where you have to start the conversation, because it's privately owned land, which is what's the economic benefit for the private landowners. Now, there could be an argument that like maybe that shopping center isn't operating at its potential and more walkability could help that, but I bet in this case that's not true, or you would have a hard time convincing the landowners because there's not a lot of vacancy in that shopping center. So I think they're probably doing fine, just based on its location, right? But if you were to start with the argument of, well, look at how much more could be developed I think you would have to, in this case, because it is such a regional draw, do some kind of structured parking. Hopefully, as we all start to drive less, that structured parking could turn into apartments or offices or something. But I think the redevelopment play would be to say, if you add structured parking, what could be added to that? And then how could the whole parking lot be redesigned in order to be much more pedestrian friendly? And I think you've seen that happening on the outskirts of that shopping center, right? There's a lot of new apartments. The things on Wilmington are much higher density with structured parking. I don't know that the walkability is that much better or meets the goals that you or I would have for that. So I think having that argument of, well, here's how much better it could be. I think the other thing that could add to this argument, though, is connecting, like, what is a logical place that someone may want to walk, right? And that from Sugar House to Fairmont Park might be a good spot, or from the S line to Sugar House Park. The draw does exist, right? So there is that really nice pedestrian pathway where the creek is. And so maybe that's where you start and you enhance that. But it's sort of like hidden right now. Anyway, so I think in this case, the problem is well stated and clear, but in order for it to gain any traction, you really have to start with the economic argument because it's privately owned land.
Thank you.
I agree with Darren. This is something that Darren and I talk about, and because we have the planning background, and so we're going in circles because we want all of the cool things and all the planning theories to work, and this is what we got into council so that we could go and lobby the rest of the council members and make changes. But at the same time, we also have a reality of the privately owned land. Even beyond that, it's actually human behavior, our city's behavior, like each of us, it's about the behavior and how do we change that? Because as long as there's a market for a parking lot, a developer, a person that is trying to make money off of a piece of land with retail, his clients are saying, I need parking to go to your shop. Otherwise, I'm not going. Right. And so that's the point, like that person, like the ones that are saying that if you don't have parking, I'm not going. So how do we get those? And so that's something that we think about, and I think we as planners, we need to start thinking about, like, there's so many things that the city could change, or so many things that we can change, but we, it's not the majority. As planners, architects, we want the same, but we're the minority, right? In the city that it's really accustomed to cars. And it's been 23 years that we have really good transportation, or at least, a really good system right now of UTA and the tracks line and all of the things that we have, but still, we're not there yet, so. Unfortunately.
I really like the street idea concept that you were referencing. Before I went to UTA, I was a department director at Salt Lake County, and we did a one-day seminar on the cost of free parking. And so there's some economic arguments to Darren's point that you could make. The one piece that you might consider too along that same route is that in a lot of cases, it's the lender who's asking for certain sort of assurances because they have to assume they're going to get the property back. And they just don't want a project that can't be sustained. They've got the building and stuff. But there are some great examples of reciprocating agreements. And I think you alluded to it, that not every property or every use needs all the parking at the same time. And if there's some way to show a reciprocating opportunity there, then you could probably make a lot more justification of cross use and then convince both the lending community, which I will say is a lot more sophisticated than they were 10 years ago, but also more importantly, the owner of the property, that they could actually increase the return value on their property through a little more strategic thinking. It takes a little bit of work to structure something like that, but with the right attorney and some good planning, you could do that and put people to ease. And once you do it, you're set and they can rely on that. So just some thoughts to think through that.
Thank you. So that drawing that she showed is actually an illustration from the Portland zoning ordinance. And in Portland, big box retail, it's a figure for the design of the drive aisles. Every zoning ordinance, you've got to, provide parking. If you provide surface parking, you have to meet certain standards for the drive aisles. And what they do in Portland is those drive aisles are designed to mimic. They're not true local streets because they're owned privately, right? But they are designed to mimic local streets, and they're required to tie into the local street network. And so they feel to the user, they feel like they're a continuation of the street grid, even though they're taking you into a parking lot, which is, I think, a small little kind of change. I mean, you lose some parking that way, but it seems to work great. So Kevin's standing up, so I'm thinking that's the signal. It's time for Moab. So we are leaving Salt Lake City. We're going to go on a road trip here. On bike trip. So Sarah, Kevin Kleiner are both here, and then Karen GN, as we call her, is zooming in from Moab. How are things down in Moab today, Karen?
They're gorgeous and warm, and Jeep Safari, the convoy has left as of yesterday. It's quite beautiful. I'm sorry I'm not with you guys, but I just would like to introduce our project, which is Moab Main Street. And the reason why we're choosing Main Street is that it is the hot area where everyone comes to congregate. And if we can switch that slide. And the reason we are also focusing on this area and why it matters is because Moab is a world-renowned destination. And even though the road is owned by UDOT, we really see that it can be used as an example for other resort communities in the state of Utah. I am a former city council member as of last year, and I created great relationships with UDOT and was able to get some pretty exciting projects off the ground. But we're not done, and we can do better. And I would really like for UDOT to be a stronger partner with us trying to create a safe community, because honestly, the Main Street is one of the most dangerous places in Grand County. I mean, there's thousands of accidents that happen on our public lands, but our Main Street is one of the most dangerous places. Next slide. So here's just a couple examples of accidents and fatalities that have happened on Highway 191. And you'll notice there's a picture of a family that is shown in the left-hand corner. The father passed away immediately, and then a day after, and it's not even mentioned in this news article, his son Israel passed away at the hospital. His wife had a child 2 months later. She delivered early. There was another victim in this accident on Main Street, and there was a 30-year-old young woman who was life flighted to Grand Junction and delivered prematurely as well. There's too many accidents and fatalities that happen on this stretch of road. And so that this is, again, a high priority, not just for our community, but for the state of Utah. Next slide, please. So the focus area that we're looking at is just a 6.5 mile area from the Colorado River up to the Shell gas station. If any of you have been through Moab, it's a very dangerous section of road. So this is just a small section that UDOT manages in the state of Utah. And so we're hoping that we could get some more collaboration in this area. Next slide. Over 30 years ago, a bypass was proposed. The downtown business community was terrified because they thought there was no way people would stop if we had a bypass. No one could envision what Moab was going to look like today. And then just 2 years ago, there was another introduction of bringing the bypass up. And there's now in that 30 years, there's a community that is in the north area that is opposed to doing a bypass. There was a redesign of North Main Street just 2 years ago, and it was a small 2.5 mile section. But what happened with that is that they've widened the road. They've basically reduced any sort of friction that would happen for a driver, and has made it very dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists and rollers. And next slide. And then Kevin's going to take it with more data points.
Yeah, so thank you, Karen. I want to get into the details a little bit and talk about some of the unique things happening in Moab. So we have big traffic spikes, obviously. Keith, you can probably see over here. What does this show? Maybe you can't see. So I'm going to tell you, it shows that all this yellow portion of the graph is transportation pollution. And this is the rest of the carbon dioxide that's put off in Grand County. And then, what is your name?
Maddie.
Maddie, can you see this one up in the corner there? Can you see the bottom of the graph? What is that number down there?
Zero. Yeah.
No, right here, right where this line is. Yeah, and then up at the top, where do you think that graph goes to?
15,000.
And what is the date on that data point?
April, May.
No, way over there in the corner.
2017.
2017. So in 2017, there was that much traffic in Moab, and it's only increased, especially since the pandemic. Could you go to the next slide, please? Back in 2013, 2011, 2013, UDOT did a safety study, and they aggregate a whole bunch of different types of safety data, including crash severity, the injuries, a bunch of different things, and they grade different routes based on that. And as you can see, the main street section right here is a black, and black is the worst possible grading, and that's the center downtown, the core of downtown Moab. And Michael, how many crashes a day per year? Oh, this should be per year were happening on Main Street back then. How many? 35. Okay, next slide. And then we've looked at this downtown section right here, and we've looked at it with updated data. And we can see that in a 10-year period, you can't see it across the top of the screen, just the header there, but there were 637 crashes, 4 fatalities, 17 serious injuries, and 13.5% of the accidents involve a CMV. Do you know what a CMV is? Who knows what a CMV is? Commercial vehicle. It's a commercial motor vehicle. 15% of the accidents are commercial motor vehicles. Those are bad accidents. And that means that now there are 64 crashes per year in this section. Next slide. Got a lot of different speed limits in town. 7 different zones at 6.5 miles. That zone where all the bad crashes are happening, 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. I mean, this is old data. They're probably bad. There are bad crashes happening all over. But you look at that and you say, okay, well, 3 miles an hour, it's got to be slow. And you know, it's got to be, that's okay. But there are a lot of different things happening here. First of all, it's a 1.2-mile section of no pedestrian crossings up the north end of town. There's a brew pub on one side and hotels on the other. There's the city market of the apocalypse. If you've ever been up there on a Saturday in Safari, you know what I'm talking about, because all the water is gone, all the eggs are gone, all the bacon's gone. And there's a new USU campus right down here. It's expected to have like 3,000 students. What's important about all 3 of those things? High speed limits. The city market's right at 35. The speed limit literally changes right out in the city market to 30. The USU campus right on the 45-55 border, like right there. The 1.2-mile no pedestrian crossing. And this is a 5-lane road with 2 breakdown lanes on the other side. But what's more interesting is how fast people are really going. Northbound, on a Wednesday at 5:30, they're averaging 55 to 59 miles per hour through town. Southbound, 50, 54.
So some of our proposed solutions, we think all of these would be good solutions and things that we would like to see eventually. Street redesigns, traffic calming, and you can see some of the other things, but the main one that we think would be the most effective, cost effective and time effective right now, you go to the next slide, would be to just reduce the speed limit, and we'd be just reducing each of these zones by 10 miles an hour. Because we can't just do that in one little section of Main Street. We've got to, use all those zones as you're driving in and out of town through that Main Street area. And we can see that the faster you go, the smaller your field of vision is. So just trying to help that. But yeah, we think that, safety wise, for everyone, cars, pedestrians, people bicycling, is going to be one of the best options, and then also just low cost. This is something that can happen fairly easily, changing the speed limit signs, and not have to, go into funding and that sort of thing for some of the bigger projects that we think are still necessary. Next slide. So yeah, these are just some of the bigger projects, road diets, redesigning the street that we think eventually are definitely needed and necessary for that area to really help the Main Street. And that is all we have. Last thing, or last slide. We kind of wrote out an action plan about things we can do to really start this process, from changing the speed limit to, the bigger ideas that we have. So you can see those as well. Let's have a quick little video, 20 seconds long.
Maybe.
Does it show the parade?
Yes.
Loaded.
I love that that's your last thing. It's like, okay, have a parade. It says video cannot be loaded, so we'll just have to imagine what it is. Thank you. It's a great presentation. Carlton, please.
The one thing I didn't see you measure or limit or indicate with a narrow corridor with high transportation demand. Why no discussion of the transit solution to both lessen the demand and also increase the pedestrian activities?
So the reason why is because a transit solution is expensive. This is a cheap solution that can be implemented immediately and would be almost universally accepted and appreciated by the local community. And so we get immediate buy-in. We don't need to deal with the cost. And we could do it very quickly. And it's not 100% effective. We recognize that there's some sort of a ratio between actual speed limit and real speed limit because, as you saw from that other graph, people travel at much higher rate of speed. But this is the first step. And by the way, transit is already part of the solution in Moab. There is a transit solution implemented right now and being further developed. Clear point.
I was going to say you could buy a half a dozen buses for the cost of construction of infrastructure changes by quite a bit, and because even the infrastructure changes aren't going to lessen your traffic demands. And so anyway, I would think about having a more comprehensive approach. Just a thought.
I think one of the things we've talked about is this incremental approach. What step do you take first? And the idea was, well, this is a step that people will buy into according to this local on the ground folk. And once you have the design speed reduced, or excuse me, the posted speed reduced, then it's easier to have a conversation about design speed and how you change the cross sections of the roadway. So yeah, this is beginning. It's not the end.
The only other thing I'd add is that UDOT actually is in the transit business, and now with a 20% match, they will match the capital. So you could actually fivefold increase your return there.
Darren, what are your observations?
Do we know what percentage of the traffic on that road is local versus pass through?
Kevin knows that.
Because that would be really interesting. I think the idea that Karen brought up at the beginning about a bypass, to me, and I know that traditionally, historically, bypasses have kind of ruined downtowns. I don't know that Moab would fall into that situation because I don't think Moab is at risk of being becoming unpopular anytime soon. So in this case, it does seem like a bypass may be a good solution to advocate for. So I don't know that just a road diet alone would be, if UDOT would be very interested in that, or if people trying to get through Moab would be as interested in that as a road diet with a bypass. I think maybe obviously a bigger project, but something that might actually be really necessary there.
So, Darren, I'll comment real quick, and I'm sure Karen has something to say, but the bypass would involve crossing the Colorado River Bridge. It's a $10 billion project or something like that. It's massive. And this is the first step to getting towards a bypass, because once we get things slow enough through town, everybody will get pissed off that's trying to go through. They will. And they'll be like, we need a bypass. And great, put the trucks over on the bypass, love it. But it is a massive undertaking. It's been a battle that's been going on back and forth for years. Certain people in the community oppose it. They happen to have certain land holdings and power within the community and political structure. But it's a long long road, as they say. Karen?
No, I was gonna say that UDOT was open to having the discussion for a bypass just 2 years ago. Both the city council and the county commission wrote a letter for our long-range plans for the area that included San Juan County, Grand County, and Emery County. And they requested that a bypass be taken off of the long-term plans. There was only 2 of us that opposed that idea for a 50-year long-term range plan. And as it is right now, it would be very difficult to have the political backing to even have that discussion, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. That is unfortunate.
So this is the only road that the commercial vehicles can go through. Like, it's the only one like that gets you through Moab and out of Moab.
This is the only way from northern Utah to southern Colorado, Arizona, northern Arizona. Has substantial through traffic. I don't know what the numbers are, and Darren, I appreciate the question, but almost regardless, the gate tourists are a huge problem as well, and lowering the speed limit will help out with everybody who doesn't know where they're going and the 4,000 U-turns that are done on a weekend in Moab. And that's really a dangerous turn. And so I do think that the through traffic would, especially the truck thing, the CMV accidents would be greatly reduced by a bypass. Would be awesome. But lowering the speed would reduce all kinds of accidents, people in side-by-sides, everything. Michael maybe had a question, then Dave.
I just wanted to I'm also from Moab, and I've been fighting this bypass for years. So if you're a truck transporting goods from the Pacific Northwest to Arizona and Texas, you have to go through Moab, Utah. We get 6,000 semis a day rolling through town. It's probably 7,000 now. This is a huge problem, huge. But from what's interesting to have you guys here is when I've talked to UDOT, they say, listen, no matter what you propose in Moab, your numbers are not going to be high enough to compete with any project in Salt Lake Valley. Because you can do a project here, make a new road, and you'll, affect 100,000 vehicles a day. We build the bypass, which only could be 100 million for maybe 130 with a bridge. It's not that many vehicles, 10,000 a day, 12,000. But it's the percentage of pass through. I don't know offhand right now, but it's a lot of pass through. Yeah.
I really like the idea of the quick, cheap, and easy getting going with that. When are you guys gonna start your action plan?
So the first part of the action plan was like to go to art fair in May and table and start to build a citizens committee and stuff. So I think Michael,
I think you have a good idea. So from what I understand from Keith, that was the thing, like this is the past. Okay, what can we do faster now and cheaper? So I think this is a really good idea. It did work for Salt Lake City that a group of 3 people came over and called each of the council members and scheduled a meeting and see if they could lobby us to that. And obviously it worked because we passed it. So I think it's a good start. I think you should go for it. I think Moab has it already has a beautiful main street, like already has a lot of things going on. So of course, if you were Moab was able to do the road diet and do all the things, the millions of dollars that it costs, it would be an awesome main street. It would be great. But again, what we were saying, I think because it's the only pass through, you get a lot of people upset because it's going to be so slow. But maybe that's what more people want. Not that many people there anyway at the end of the day.
So we did an actual time study, and we drove from both ends of town at both speeds, a standard speed, posted speed limit, and then a 10-mile reduction. And we found that the speed through the 6-mile section at the standard speed was about 11 and a half minutes, and about 13 minutes going through town at the reduced speed. So it's really a very small, 13 and a half minutes, about 2-minute difference. going through, all the way through town. And this was at a slow time of day. So this would be basically the maximum difference. Because when traffic picks up, of course, everybody's going slower. And so the maximum difference would be about 2 minutes.
So if you went through twice, you could do your presentation. Lucas. Okay. I could have just, you get to sit here. He's automated his whole thing. This is a video. And before we start, I just have to say, Lucas has been working on this idea for a couple of years because we did a pilot version of the Wasatch Transportation Academy last spring. And this was Lucas's project last spring. And he wanted to do it, the class again, and we talked about different projects. No, you have such a great idea. Stick with your original idea. So this is Lucas Florence and his project from 2021.
South in Salt Lake City are vital arterials, funneling the majority of downtown commuters on and on the next 15. These streets are responsible for ushering an average of 90,000. Fortunately, freeway-like qualities of these streets has had a negative impact on the surrounding neighborhood, created a rift in Salt Lake City. 20 feet wide with 6 lanes, high-speed one-way traffic. These streets are uncomfortable and outright dangerous for pedestrians and bicyclists. In fact, in 2019 alone, 8 pedestrians and 3 bicyclists were struck by vehicles on the streets. Hundreds of new housing units continue to be built on or near 500 and 600 South, making walkability on these streets more important than ever. And not only is the environment directly surrounding 500 and 600 South impacted, but these streets cause a citywide disconnect for mobility, blocking residents from the Brandon, Central 9, and Liberty Wells from easily accessing downtown and Central City. Urbanists might argue that we eliminate traffic lanes on these streets to mitigate their impact, but these streets are already reaching their capacity, with traffic getting backed up every rush hour. And with more and more people commuting to downtown every year, these streets must maintain, if not increase, their capacity. So what's the solution? If these streets are moved underground, traffic could flow more quickly and efficiently than ever. Without the disruption of cross streets, there would be no need for traffic lights. And without pedestrians, speed limits could be increased. Meanwhile, on the surface above, the streets would be replaced with human-scale greenways that prioritize pedestrians, cyclists, and social gathering. The expansive width of these rights of way gives the city nearly 2 acres of new land for every block that's lower to the ground, providing ample room for trails, plazas, sport courts, and more. Not only would these greenways provide the neighborhood with much needed open space, but they could become regionally significant destinations like New York's Highline or Atlanta's Beltline. Of course, these greenways would still need to provide vehicle access to streets, businesses, and residencies. But even with a single lane of traffic flanking each side of the greenways, there would still be ample room for human-scale amenities. In 2005, Reno, Nevada lowered a 2-mile stretch of its freight rail line that ran through the city's downtown into a 30-foot trench. The trench was topped with public plazas, green space, and even a building. The project cost Reno about $282 million, but the economic and social benefit it brought to the city has been immeasurable. A similar or greater price tag can be expected for this project. While UDOT's Transportation Investment Fund operates on about $8 million per year, there are multiple funding opportunities that could supplement the project outside of the funds. The Biden administration's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act appropriated $1 billion towards the Reconnecting Communities program, which funds projects that reduce the negative impacts caused by transportation infrastructure. Tax increment financing could also be used to fund this project, as it would likely bring immense economic activity to the area. Linear green spaces have been found to have enormous economic impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods. Salt Lake City's S-Line Trail was reported to have generated roughly $2 billion of investment in the Sugar House neighborhood. Additional funding could be sourced by selling or leasing some of the newly created land from this project. According to the county assessor, an average of nearly $4 million per acre just for it. Lastly, private funding could likely be sourced out financing these projects. Developers have built heavily in the city, but 566 South continue to hinder a walkable environment area. Landowners in this neighborhood could invest in this project, reduce the negative impacts the streets have on their developments. It's time for UDOT, Salt Lake City, and the Wasatch Front Regional Council to ask what we want for the future of 566 South. If we do nothing, not only will these streets continue to inhibit the urbanization of Salt Lake City, they won't be able to accommodate the expected increase in traffic volume in the future. Lowering these streets underground would be a major undertaking, but given its potential to transform the city for the better, it's a solution that transportation planners would be not to explore.
I can see Darren, or Darren can see.
Cool. Yeah. 500 south, 600 south, like great, a lot of interest. So I think it's, you're going in a good direction. I think, you mentioning that infrastructure bill by the Biden administration, has already bore its fruit. Is that how you say it? Like, bore some fruit, because Salt Lake City got some money from that pool of money for the connecting street. So we have some money over there. Great. So thanks to all of the Utah delegation that voted for it and lobbied for it. Then you have those developers where they're also really interested in doing something about it. So they are pushing really hard for a law that's called the HTRC. You probably are familiar. So it's similar to an RDA area. You kind of, decide that this is the area that you want to collect taxes from, so they can reinvest in the streets. So tomorrow the RDA is presenting on some of that. So you should tune in and see, if we're going to there's some traction there. There's also the Rio Grande Depot, like the train box idea as well. That it was also an idea from a constituent that came over and said, we have this idea, I'm not sure if they were students or not. And so it's all moving in the right direction with it. So I would love for you to stay involved and for you to keep beating that drum to whoever you meet and encounter, because I think that's how things start boiling and that's how things start moving if there's a lot of interest. So I'm there with you. I'm gonna be there, beating that drum. These two streets are so important for downtown, and everything. I love everything about it.
Is the H2C funding available for public infrastructure too, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because
Yeah, it's for at least sidewalks, like some sort of, and I think there's a little bit for streets as well. Yeah, as far as I remember, yes. Maybe wrong, but tomorrow I confirm with you. There we go. It was my understanding that was the push from the developers to get that going for that area.
So it has to be associated with the transit stuff. So
it's a half-mile buffer, right?
yeah, it would be a little bit of a stretch to do the full stretch there.
Right.
Because there's not really a station.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's a
track station, but
yeah.
But you do have the Main Street one on 6. So if you could do that one, and then also the one by the on 6 West by the what do you call it, like the central station where. So that one is kind of like a given, and then we can apply for more. And so we're thinking Main Street as well, and 5th South, and then doing another. So it's also 2 areas.
I like the video. I thought that was a clever way to present the idea. There's, in my ideal world, we bury all kinds of things from the train to the freeway to, I hadn't thought about 5th and 6th South. My questions, if we could bury one thing, I guess I'm not sure that maybe we can bury all of them, probably not, but if we could, only do one, then this is the first time I've thought of 5th and 6th South. And so it's like, okay, is that worth it? Is that better than the train or the freeway? Maybe, maybe not. I would be open to having that conversation. My thoughts are, though, there's probably a lot we could do on 5th and 6th South that would be a little bit easier. Or if we were to bury it, maybe we're only burying it for a few blocks and putting really nice public spaces on it and start that way. Because it is a street that is sort of collects all the traffic from downtown, from all over the area, to sort of funnel it to the freeway. I'm not sure how that would function underground. Like, how do I get into that? Where's the ramp that gets me underground?
Yeah.
Is that cross street? Is it?
Video that showed basically the parking garage entrances that are around downtown would be kind of your access ramps onto the streets.
So, and I think that could be interesting. I also wonder if it wouldn't be easier to just convince UDOT that that's not needed, and it can just be less convenient to drive through our downtown. And you can go to 7th East and go down to 21st South, or you can just take a little bit longer to get to the freeway. But I mean, the problem statement's clear, and I do like how you started to talk about the economic and the sort of quality of life benefits that come from that. I think those were well stated arguments in the video.
Darren, is that in your district? Where is your district boundary?
It's on as mine's at 8th South, so that's not my problem. I don't have to worry about that.
I wondered if, just because as you get into large infrastructure projects, and not the pictures or the ideas, but I just wondered if you'd given any thought to what the underlying infrastructure would be, and like groundwater levels or major utilities through there, because those are the things that really drive up the cost of a project like that, and also whether or not tax increment could even begin to offset that. And so it's not that you wouldn't want to dream, but thinking through a little bit of that to identify, a cross section of, here's what's in the road, because it eventually has to go somewhere. And I just know in projects a little bit on the western edge of that, you're pretty low ground or pretty high groundwater. So you have to do a lot of pumping to be able to go underground. And anyway, so you'd want to think through that, at least frame it a little enough to help people feel like you began to address it.
Yeah, I live right by there, and a construction site right next to me has been pumping out water.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
So I wanted to add that I think there's a reality as well, like Salt Lake City, we're geographically constrained, we're building, we're densifying, we are growing, we're getting more people. So I think at some point, we're all like anxious, we want this to happen tomorrow and we need to, but I think at some point, maybe in the future, like you guys are so young, you might, my time come in your lifetime, because we're gonna put all these people, and we're, how are we maximizing on the space, especially our wide street. So yeah, maybe right now to us it's like, oh, it's complicated because of the water table, it's complicated because it's so expensive. And maybe in the future it will make sense financially to actually go through the trouble of the construction of the water table, of the, of the money, the funding. So don't lose hope, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it could happen at some point because of just natural things are happening around. We can go that direction at some point. So, yeah. Mhm.
I don't know how easy it would be to do, but I think you need to share a copy of that with Andrea also.
Oh, yeah.
She was really interested in this topic last year when you presented it. Yeah. And she's the planning director for UDOT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's send her a link to the video. Yeah.
So Michael, okay, thank you. Yeah, can you get,
Oh, yeah, I got you. You gotta share it first. There you go.
Hi, wherever the screen is. My name is Michael Liss. I live in Moab. And I've been working on this issue of Arches National Park for like the last 7 years. Okay. The problem is that as the park became more popular, the infrastructure was never addressed, never fixed. And so the park just decided to create an advanced reservations program, which was the first one in the country for an entire national park. So I'm going to present to you guys because you're here. I spent this last session of Utah legislature talking about these issues and actually had a huge success. I got $1.2 million to extend the bike path on US 191. So now you can safely bike into Arches. So that was amazing. So this one is about car traffic. Okay. And I mainly, like you guys, I talked to Romney and Lee, and John Curtis is our guy, and then the Utah legislature. So Arches National Park, over there. The entrance to Arches is always congested. Can we fix it? Next slide. In peak season, visitors wait 1.5 hours to get into Arches. And this slide is the Park Service's most precious slide. They show it all the time to justify everything. Okay. Next picture. So how did we get here? Can you fix that thing? Because none of my answers are going to show. Okay. I had it all designed. Whatever. Next slide. Okay. Before the national park, there were 2 dirt roads to access the area. So when there wasn't, you can see the boundary of Arches here. Like that, here's Moab down here. Before, there was a dirt road called Salt Valley into there, and another dirt road called Willow Springs into there. And so what just happened now is I got the bike path extended from here to here, so now you can bike in there. Anyway, that's what we had before. Next slide. Okay, in the 1950s, a new paved entrance was built for Arches. So in the 1950s, Moab wanted to grow. So they said, instead of entering there, let's build the entrance right here and go in that way, which was very difficult because you know the entrance is very steep. I mean, nowadays you would never do that. But the little town wanted to be close to the entrance in the 1950s. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we have one entrance. So visitors must drive all the way to Devil's Garden and then all the way back. Okay, there's one way in, one road. Everyone's going back and forth. Next slide. With no major infrastructure improvements in 70 years, one entrance is not working. So nothing's changed in 50 years, okay, as the park became more popular. Next slide. The current advanced reservations requirement is not reducing congestion. So what happened is the Park Service said, we're going to require reservations. So this affects you guys. The state is growing, the city is growing. If you want to say, hey, let's go to Moab this weekend and go to Arches, never going to happen. You have from April to October, you have to book 3 months in advance. Okay. Last year, I calculated 200,000 people were denied entry to Arches. So I'm advocating for the 200,000 people. I'm advocating for the 300 million Americans. There's nobody advocating for these people. Moab wants to close the town down. The National Park Service doesn't really want to work that hard. So this was their only idea. Okay, so they did the advanced reservations plan, and it's not, they said it would reduce the congestion at the gate, but it's not. So now the reason isn't even solving the solution they came up with. Next slide. Okay, is there a solution? Can we get all visitors into Arches with minimal wait times and no reservations? That's the question. Okay, next slide. Yes, we can pave Salt Valley Road, the current dirt road, north entrance to Arches. That's my Jeep at the north entrance. Amazing road. You go down this dirt road, you see the La Salle Mountains over there. This is Devil's Garden, Fiery Furnace on this side. Next slide. Okay, so now we will have 2 ways to enter Arches National Park. We'd have the current south entrance, and then we'd have the north entrance. So just
You drove it until it didn't work. I drove into like a little water pump. I blew 2 water pumps. I blew like an oil pan or 2. And
Did you hit
turbos
oil
were
pan
still.
on shit?
Yeah, I planned that. I think
what
I
I
put
thought.
like 1 oil pan in and then got 1 fixed. Maybe
Yeah.
I only planned it.
So what's interesting about this is what I figured out over years of advocacy is that the Park Service, actually, they can only think within their boundaries, okay? They can think within their boundaries. So they're like, this is not possible. So my strategy now has been twofold. One is if I can get the bikes to the door here, which now we did. So now we got the bikes to the door. Now I got to get the cars to the door up there by having the legislature work on it and having UDOT work on it. It's sort of complicated. I didn't really do slides for this because it's a county road, not a state road, so it can't be on the UDOT priority list. I didn't cover that because of time. Next slide. So now what would happen is now you can travel through Arches one way. I-70 is 11 miles beyond that, so you can go that way, or, next slide, or from Moab, you can go south to north. So now you've reduced congestion in the park by 50% because people are gonna go that way or that way, and there's 2 entrances. Next slide. And now the bonus is now visitors can access Arches, meaning actual Arches, in Klondike Bluffs, which is that circle there, and Eagle Park, which is the circle that's a little cut off. Move the thing down, up there. And one thing that's interesting is when you look at the Arches brochure, okay, get the brochure, people want to see Arches. There are 19 Arches in the brochure. So that's where everyone goes. How many Arches do you think are in the park? 50. Anyone else? 100. There's over 2,000 Arches. So if you just put double the Arches in the brochure, 40, 60, 80, everyone would disperse. Let alone creating 2 new regions. I could show you 50 Arches in Eagle Park. I could show you 60 in Klondike Bluffs. Like literally, we've become a culture of I gotta see the biggest, the best thing. So here's me, my selfie, delicate arch. What if there were 100 Arches? People would spread out. You'd have a better experience. Next slide. So with 2 park entrances, congestion will be cut in half, eliminating entry wait times. Next slide. Now visitors can access Arches in Klondike Bluffs and Eagle Park. This was a really cool video, but it doesn't work as a PDF. But what's cool about Klondike Bluffs is when the area was nominated to be a national monument at that point in the 1920s, the rancher nominated Klondike Bluffs. He didn't even know about Delicate Arch, okay? This is this amazing area, nicer or as nice as Fiery Furnace, which is amazing, that nobody goes to. Next slide. Let's improve the Arches National Parks visitor experience, because that's what the Park Service talks about, the visitor experience. And a weird thing about that is if you look at the C-suite of the National Park Service in Washington, there's like 13 people, no one's in charge of the visitor experience. That's not even on their radar. Their radar is protect the environment, which they haven't defined. They're, it's like, it's not this. Anyway, that's my presentation. I need $25 million to get the road again. And I want your citizens to be able to visit Arches. What if there's a nice weekend next weekend? So let's jump in the car and go. Not going to happen. There you go.
I didn't see it on the map, but is there a town or something on, that leads off that north entrance that would benefit from that, or?
Yeah.
Or, it's a private way to benefit.
Yeah. So what's interesting is about that, and that's one of my main avenues with the legislature, is when the National Park Service does an impact study of a national park or any one of their units, they choose the local gateway area and they draw a 60-mile radius circle around the park. So Grand County thinks they own Arches, they don't. The local gateway region that is affected by Arches is 5 counties in Utah and 3 in Colorado. So I have met with people in San Juan County, Emery County. You could make Green River, could be actually one of our senators here, not our own region, but their region. He said, yeah, if it wasn't for that road in the 50s, Green River would be Moab today because the entrance would be up there. Yes. That's a really good, I think, avenue for me to pursue.
Yeah, I think it's certainly one of the strongest for sort of these remote transportation investments in those, and state senators would look at that pretty strongly.
Yeah, but the weird thing is those counties don't even know that they're affected. They don't know. I got to tell you, you are affected. San Juan knows now. San Juan has seen a precipitous drop because what was happening is Moab was getting so crowded that they would get all the bleed traffic and you could get a cheaper hotel room in Blanding or Monticello. But they're noticing the dip now.
I thought it was compelling, obviously. It's very high energy, like, of course, I want to help, yes. You're right. Why is not happening already? But then they give me, this Kevin is like, there's more to this, like, I need to more, like, I need to, because I'm not familiar with the
Yes.
area and how it all works. There has to be more to this than, maybe that simple solution. I'm sure there's more forces and more issues that we don't know. So, but at the same time, like you said, I think he knows more about this and stuff like that, that it might be an interesting. Another thing, you reminded me of Green River, was it you or you said Green River? We had a project when I was in school. We had to go to Green River and help them, like come up with solutions for the main street or some sort of economic development for them. And it was the hardest thing. Like I never thought of like it was the hardest thing to like come up with because they don't have a lot going on. But I think if you and whoever like brought that idea back, hey, we might have a solution for Green River. Look at this, look at how it connects. Because at the time, trust me, like they had like the watermelons going on for them, like the little main street with a train, and the main street apparently was thriving was pornographic video studios. That's what like was keeping the town alive. And then the river, and so we're like, I came up with like, well, maybe we do like camping in the river and people could actually go and like, but it wasn't like something like substantial, like really good, that could really help that town, you know what I'm saying? So I think bringing that idea, hey, look, now that there's a connection for you, economic, state, we have to do something about it. I think it gets like.
So two answers. One on that, the one thing I found that's weird about Green River is most of that county's population is somewhere else, like all of it. And then Green River is like this outlier. So the county commission is not that aware of Green River. It's like an extra thing. And in terms of like, there must be more to it in terms of this. It's almost like you're the city council, okay? And you said, we're done with this population. We like Salt Lake at this population, we're done, close the door. That's how Moab feels right now, okay? They literally don't like tourists. And we had a diversification program. Okay, they couldn't even think of what to diversify it to. They just didn't like tourism. So the real issue is the town, can the park grow? And how does the town deal with growth? Okay, we just haven't dealt with the growth question. And all these problems come up like the bypass and not having the bypass is because if you don't think about the future, you're never gonna plan for it. Karen was the only council member who voted against the letter saying we didn't want to bypass, okay? Karen's amazing. She and I were on a committee for transportation and we were batting around ideas for transit. Karen pushed it, and 2 weeks ago, right, Karen? She was the driving force behind our new Moab transportation. So if you come to Moab, there's now a little bus that goes up and down Main Street. And then 2 of the buses are like Ubers. So you can just go on the app's amazing, and you can Uber all around town.
Let's hear from Jared first.
I also thought the presentation was exciting and interesting. I didn't know about a lot of those things. My question though, that I think if this is a reality and this is the right thing and this is what needs to happen, I don't think the presentation adequately covered the environmental impacts that this would happen. And that is going to be a major pushback. And it's something that I would need to have answered for myself before I would be interested in having this, in like supporting this. I don't represent anything related to Moab, but that's something that if I were in a decision-making situation, I would need answered, but I know that there's a community of people out there that are going to vehemently oppose this on environmental concerns. So I think that was left out a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't cover that. I mean, I had 3 minutes, hello. But there are two things you should know about that. One, it is a county road. Okay, it is a county road, so you would just be paving the existing road. But what the Park Service has done that relates to what you've said is they've taken a national park and they've said of this national park, like 71,000 acres, 94% are, it's a weird term, it's not even a wilderness study area, are like desired wilderness, okay? So they would like the park to be 94% wilderness, okay? The problem with that is when you look at the Wilderness Act, which I studied all this, it says, okay, if you're gonna have a wilderness area, it can have no paved or dirt roads on it, okay? So Salt Valley has a road, a county road that predates the park, okay? So there's a road running up and down. People take it all the time. You can run a like a regular car, like a Prius on it. But so it shouldn't be a wilderness area because you see a car going back and forth. But what they did is they basically said it's wilderness till we get to the road. So yeah, there are these issues that'll have to be worked through like that. So yeah, I'm aware of that. But then when they say we're stopping the people from getting in the park because of the environment, I'm like, well, what is it? They have one slide, which is a car ran over a bush on the side of the road, okay? But that's like really one car run over one bush. So here's the thing about the Delicate Arch parking lot, not to go over my time, okay? This is another part of the issue. The Delicate Arch parking lot, most famous site in Utah, right? Everyone wants to go. We have 2 acres for 400 vehicles, okay? And they're like, one more parking spot, that's the end of the environment. There's no more environment, what's the point? Guess what? Around the 2 acres, they took 160 acres and they bulldozed it because they didn't like the tamarisk, which is an invasive species. I totally get it, okay? But here's the thing, because you don't like the tamarisk, you're gonna bulldoze 160 acres. It's already bulldozed. Let's double or triple the Delicate Arch parking lot right there. And what they said in their their EA, environmental assessment, because they wanted to do it, they said, well, if you don't destroy more than 1% of the cryptobiotic soil, it's okay. So they've already given us a number in an official document of how you protect the environment and what the threshold is. Okay, so I already have the number because guess what? If we just double or triple the Delicate Arch parking lot, problem solved. Everyone could get in. My time's up.
Your time is up.
Okay, I'm really into this topic.
And if at the beginning of his presentation, you're wondering, how did Michael convince the state legislature to spend all that money on that? You now have your in, you now know how to do it. He is a force of nature, talking about natural. So for our final presentation tonight, Alex Stewart is going to talk to us about transportation at the HRCs, excuse me.
Well, you did my intro, I'm Alex Stewart, and I'm. So some history and context, I'm assuming some of you are already familiar, but in 2019, Salt Lake County transitioned to a dispersed shelter model. So we went from that centralized downtown road home shelter to several different homeless resource centers or HRCs. You can see that on the map there. We'll go to the next slide. And so one of the issues that came up with the dispersed shelter model is that they're located outside of UTA's fare-free zone. That fare-free zone was accessible at the downtown location, but the HRCs are all located outside of it to various degrees. A recent University of Utah study last year indicated a general decline in service access associated with that post-decentralized facility model, especially pronounced amongst guests of the South Salt Lake shelter, just because it was kind of far away. Advantage Services has kind of stepped in to provide a private shuttle service to try and make up for those differences, but they are limited to going to other HRCs as well as to like Vegan Center and some homeless service providers downtown.
Next, why does it matter? So I think when we consider the effects of changing transportation dynamics for the clients, we have to consider transportation's relationship and movement's relationship with criminalization of homelessness, as well as on a broader scale, the criminalization of poverty. So that may or may not, you can probably read it. That's Utah State statute for a 3rd-degree felony theft. Repeat offenders, if you've been charged with that before, if you have a prior criminal record, if you've taken UTA before, those penalties can compound on themselves. So at least in terms of the statute, that can lead to up to 5 years of imprisonment, and again, a felony conviction. I have not heard of 5 years, but I have heard of 6 months in jail associated with that. Go to the next one. And then possible solutions. So none of these are mutually exclusive, but I did want to focus on one in particular tonight based on some feedback I received from a case manager at the Gail Miller Resource Center. Go to the next one. And that's going to be the making UTA passes a little bit easier for HRC clients to get. This is going to build off of an existing service that UTA offers. They do offer like the discounted passes. Service providers can purchase it for a discount. They also offer individuals, not necessarily resource center clients, but individuals low income, disability, Medicare can apply for a discounted monthly pass. Next one. So when I asked my former manager, the manager of case managers at Gail Miller, his feedback was primarily these 2 things on the right-hand side, getting more of a dedicated budget allocation, a reliable budget allocation for those passes, as well as something to help navigate the barriers that exist in that affordable pass application for the general population. And so as far as budget allocation, maybe we can get some clarification on this, but from my understanding that was given to me was that that's sort of an afterthought compared to where most of the budgeting is going straight into the resource operations. And then sometimes they have run out in the past, they've run out of the passes of the tokens, and that can lead to more destabilization in the lives of the people staying at the resource centers, losing that access to that safe transit pass. The other thing that we kind of came up with was possibly using case manager certification to bypass some of those supporting documents that are needed to apply for the reduced fare pass. This is has precedent, right? So a case manager can write a certified letter, like a letterhead, certifying that this person is staying at the HRC. That can be used to get a voucher, so you don't have to pay to get your ID. They can write a letter for that. Case managers also already certify chronicity for homelessness. So if you're applying for a Salt Lake City Housing Authority application, the case manager goes into the database that has that person's information, name, date of birth, et cetera, and certifies the dates that they have been staying at that resource center and other places to certify chronicity. So not a brand new thing, but something that could potentially overcome some of those barriers, especially for folks who may be quickly coming in and out of homelessness. They might be relocating pretty quickly out of those resource centers and could benefit from having that transit pass continuing to be something they can pay for personally. That's it.
Did you say that you were a case manager at the Gail Miller Resource Center?
So it's actually a case manager for the Ramada, but my manager of case managers works for Gail Miller.
Okay, well, thanks for doing that work. That's important. I think this feels like a low-hanging fruit. This feels like something we should be able to accomplish pretty easily, and perhaps the correct people are just right here to figure out how to solve that. Obviously, Carlton is in the best position, but if this was something where there was an ask of the city to provide some additional funding for these passes, I would vote to support that. So I think that this has to be doable.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we've never incarcerated or done charges for somebody on ferry base. And usually if they get arrested, they get arrested for other charges that they might have as an outstanding warrant or something like that. So I'm just want to make that clear. But a couple of things I would say is that one of the things that are often missing is that even in the homeless community, they've never learned how to use transit. And so there's a need for educating them on how to get there, because even the South Salt Lake Center is actually only a couple blocks from a major, our Meadowbrook facility where we have our largest busing operation. And there's actually really good service on 33rd. And so what we found and what we found when they went there is that they were so used to being shuttled from one location to the other that they never learned how to use the system itself, so that when they got a job, they knew how to get to a place. And so there's a real educational piece there. We did change, and so like if the city or somebody was interested, they can get a full 30-day pass for $22. And we wrote it off 75%. On the qualifying for low income, we're piloting right now an opportunity for providers to just enter the data themselves and then qualify the person to minimize the challenges that you identified there. And they're already piloting that. They're kind of gearing it toward the criteria for free lunch, so that it's kind of a standard that's fairly easy to meet, fairly universal. But the one question I had for you, your thought about is that, and I'm just curious from your own experience, at the Ramada, any thought about how to help them sort of gain that independence of using the system and becoming familiar with it? And we do have some travel trainers and do that. But when we've helped on some certain days, you do have to, you got to do a lot of training. They're just never used to using transit.
Yeah, I would, well, so we actually didn't have the bus tokens at the time, so we had to keep writing taxi vouchers, which was challenging financially and convenience wise. But I would say, like, I used to just punch it in my phone because Google Maps has like the transit option. So I usually just punched in my phone and showed them. And a lot of people, not everybody has phones, but because of the, like, they call it Obama phones. I can't remember what they're actually called, but everyone's like, do you have an Obama phone? Is the person with the Obama phone here? So a lot of people have phones and phone plans. So I think what I would direct them to do is to get like a Google Maps app and show them how to plug that in. It's just.
So you feel like they could, I mean, there's actually a new app, a relatively new app called Transit. And it's probably even better, but I just wondered if you felt like they at least had a phone that they could use.
I feel like if they haven't lost it, or, they've been in a place where the phone issuer person has been hanging out, they usually will have a phone. But if not, if someone is a service provider, they can always like look it up on the computer or show them, like I would put it in my phone and show them. And sometimes I write down the directions if they needed it. Yeah, it's hard. The wayfinding, in my experience, trying to give directions to somebody who is homeless, especially like chronically homeless, has been that way for a long time. There's a very different mental map that you're trying to navigate. So it may be like more like landmarks than street names, or it's just, and senses of time, very different too. So kind of have to feel.
I was going to say that because I think probably like for the more regular person, like it could be, it's a great idea. First of all, it's a great idea, and I fully support it as well. So yeah, we should. It's something we can get done easily, but I think the extra step is to think about the population itself, and like what you said, like the chronically homeless and the ones that we usually see in the streets are the ones that need not just like showing them what to do and what the landmarks are. It's way beyond that because of their mental capabilities at the time. So it's something that we struggle in the city as a society every day, because we're doing our basic, and we cover and we help. But I think the mental health issue that we see every day, we're not stressed enough and we don't talk about enough. So with this group of people, it's a difficult population, and so you need the extra case manager to actually walk with them and potentially hold their hand, and show them a few times. And so that takes a lot of resources, like employees and case managers that are willing to do that. And so it's a lot of work, that's what I'm trying to say, it's possible to do, but we all need to start thinking that way. Hey, these folks need the extra. Not just the case managers telling them what to do, we all can tell them what to do here. You know, here's your path, and this is how you get there. And that, you know, and that's not, you know, unfortunately, with what we're seeing in our society and with our homeless neighbors, they need the extra help. And so we need to start thinking about it that way.
Well, Alex, you have brought us to a very strong conclusion, and it sounds like we've got a majority here who can just adopt your proposed solution. And so, well done. And it's been fascinating because we workshop all of these projects, and so everybody kind of knows everybody else's project pretty well by now. And Alex is watching Alex's process that she's worked through her ideas and kind of field tested different ideas and worked with the people on the street that she works with and getting their responses. She's done a lot of research on this, and not just technical research, but political idea testing. Great job. All right, so that brings us to a close for tonight's festivities. We will be back here in a week and for 7 more projects, and they are as varied and I think as interesting as what you've seen tonight. And so invite everybody back, same bat time, same bat panel, and thank you all.
I apologize for being.